Here you go, sir.
What is this?
It's time.
It's time?
It's time.
Oh, it's time. So as you can see, Sam wanted me to do the updated version of the Etemon and Sukamon deck, and I guess it's about time since we got some BT13 support recently, or a while ago, but you know, that's the most updated one. So let's just begin with the Digi-Egg cards right here with the Pokemon from BT6, still a very generically good black Digi-Egg, being able to synergize with your on deletion effects, you know, revealing top card, grabbing a black Digimon, and then adding it to your hand. That's really what you're trying to go for, and this is the 4 eggs all you really need. So into our rookies and level 3s, let's begin with the BT13 stuff with the brand new Chumon right here. It's an on play, letting you trash a card with Sukamon or Etemon in its name to grab yourself back a Sukamon from your trash back to your hand. So you can cycle and choose, and you can sort of like combo and synergize with your different Sukamons based on what effects you actually want, which is kind of nice to have for sure. It has the inheritable as well on deletion. If this Digimon has Sukamon or Etemon in its name, you get to play one Chumon from your trash suspended without paying the memory cost. So, you know, a lot of floating capabilities, a lot of really good on deletion effects. This new one is just definitely a really good one to have it as a 4 of. And then still, we definitely like to still play 4 copies of the older BT11 one. This is just really neat. With its 1 Digivolve cost, sometimes it's not really the greatest, but sometimes it can be kind of clutch to sort of like, you know, manipulate the memory gauge a little bit and choke a little bit, which is nice to have. But mainly, I think this card is just more suitable when you hard play it or play it via an effect. So then you can utilize it's your turn to reduce your Digivolution cost by 1 when it gets into a Sukamon in its name. And being able to Digivolve for 1 memory into a level 4 is just very efficient, and it's definitely always nice to have for sure. And its on deletion effect is exactly the same as the BT13 Chumon, letting you play a Chumon back from trash suspended for free. And then to sum up for all our rookies and Chumons, 4 copies of the no memory gain Chumon to the opponents other than Tamers. Just again, trying to fulfill as many Chumon names as possible in this particular deck because there's a lot of floating, a lot of like abilities that synergize with this particular name. So that's really all you really need to run when it comes to the rookies. Now, one thing you might not know is that Etemon, Sukamon, this entire archetype and whole Digivolution line is going to continue to get support every single set. And with all that much sheer amount of support, I'm very sure one day this deck will become tier 0, right? It has to be, right? Right? Well, be sure to subscribe and give this video a like, as eventually we'll get there one day. Moving into level 4s, again, starting off with the newer stuff, we got a brand new Sukamon in its Platinum form. Platinum Sukamon Digi-evolving for 2 on top of a black Digimon that's level 3. It has a very simple effect. On deletion, it just de-Digivolves one of your opponent's Digimon. And this is really nice, and it sort of like interrupts their turn and gives you a bit of defense and control a little bit, which is really nice. And very similar to all of our other Sukamon related inheritable effects that we have, that if this Digimon will be deleted, you can delete another Sukamon instead to prevent the deletion, to giving it like the deck kind of some sort of form of like protection, which is nice. And then continuing on with our BT11 Sukamon, this one has the on deletion, revealing top 3 cards to let you search to grab yourself a Chumon, a Sukamon, or Etemon in its name, and then add it to your hand, trashing the rest. And trashing is pretty crucial because it does help you set up some pieces that you would need for later combos as well. And then with its all turns inheritable, exactly the same as the Platinum Sukamon as we saw earlier too. And then moving on, we have 4 copies of the BT3 Sukamon. This one's one of my favorites because it just has that on deletion floating capability to reveal the top 3 cards of your deck and then letting you play a Chumon among them instead of adding to your hand. So you can keep your board afloat with Digimon present at all the times. And this is when they just don't stop coming and they just keep coming again and again. Doesn't have the inheritable, which is totally fine, but also just the 3 costs, which is a very, very memory efficient thing to have. And then last but not least, we're running 2 copies of the Digimon. Itself is treated as a Numemon in its name. Overall, doesn't have a whole lot of synergy, but it does have that on play, trashing 1 card with Numemon, Sukamon, Nanimon, or Etemon in its name. You get to draw 2 cards, and draw power is nice to have every now and then in the entire deck. And overall, because its name, it's called Digimon, it's not really called Sukamon, doesn't have any direct name synergy, which would have been more ideal, which is why we only run the 2 copies overall. And as you guys can notice, all the level 4 lineup is actually a lot more heavier, but that's totally okay because all of them have 3 costs or less when it comes to having to hard play them. So it's very, very memory efficient, and that's the whole idea. The whole deck really revolves on having as much poo-poo as you can. Okay, so moving into our level 5s, 4 copies of the King Sukamon from BT11. Being able to Digivolve for 3 specifically in a Sukamon's name is really what we're trying to go for, so that we can just pay 3 memory instead of its 4. It has the on play when Digivolving effect. If your opponent has 16 or more cards in their trash, or if you have 3 or more Sukamons in your own trash, you can turn one of your opponent's Digimon into a Sukamon and they become a white Digimon with 3000 DP. And that disrupts a lot of the synergy when it comes to like any archetype-based decks, because then it stops like them from digivolving and comboing and synergizing and whatnot. Can potentially buy you an entire turn too. And turning them into a smaller Digimon, you can potentially swing over it and do a whole lot of creative plays with it overall. It has a when attacking effect as well. Gaining security +1 for every Sukamon you have to do more damage in security checks is really nice. And not to mention, even though with its lower DP, with the combination with some of your Sukamon inheritables, you can end up deleting your Sukamons, or not even just your own Sukamons. You can delete your opponent's Sukamon, which you turned into, to protect it and from having it prevent it from deleting. And then again, speaking of the inheritable, it does exactly the same thing as all the other Sukamon does to give you that kind of extra layer of protection, which is definitely very nice. Now, moving into our Etemon stuff, which is actually more so of our main level 5 Digimon card of the deck. Etemon right here, we're bringing back the BT13. It has blocker and a very simple effect of on deletion. Reveal the top 5 cards of your deck. You get to play a level 6 Etemon Digimon from its name for free. And then afterwards, you bottom deck everything else. And we play a handful of level 6 Etemon names in this particular deck, which has a lot of synergy and comboing. We are going for that high roll life right here with this particular card, so then we can play it for free, get really greedy, but establish a really strong board presence with it. And I think this card is just really, really good for the deck. We do play the 2 copies of the BT11 Etemon. This one's just okay, kind of like a nice tech card to have every now and then, just to like, with its when digivolving and on-play effect to trash one card from your hand, with Sukamon in its name specifically, so that you can minus 3000 DP to one of your opponent's Digimon, and then minus security 1 as well to that particular Digimon too, which is kind of nice to have. It can synergize quite nicely with King Sukamon because you turn it into a 3k Sukamon, and then you can also digivolve into this or hard play this to get rid of that Digimon, which is really good. And then with its inheritable, very similar with the whole Sukamon POO protection we got right there too. But that's it for level 5s. We have the level 6s, where let's start off with a brand new one here with the BT13 KingEtemon. This KingEtemon digivolves for 5 costs, but being able to digivolve within its archetype, you pay 4 costs instead on top of an Etemon or Sukamon in its name as long as it's level 5. Now it has an all turns once per turn effect. When another Digimon with Etemon or Sukamon in its name is deleted, one of your opponent's Digimon gets minus 3000 DP and security -1, very similar to the BT11 Etemon which you saw earlier. It would be nicer if this was not once per turn, so then you can really obstruct and sort of make it difficult during your opponent's turn to play, but it is what it is, which is totally fine. It does have a secondary and last effect, which is opponent's turn, all your Digimon with Etemon or Sukamon in their names gain blocker and cannot be bounced back to the hands or deck, which is a pretty neat protection to have, which really, you know, emphasizes like the black color strategy with this entire deck overall. And yeah, really love this card. Really cool. And yeah, just continuing on with our Etemon stuff, we still definitely want to play the 4 copies of the middle Etemon from BT11, just because of its on-play when digivolving effect lets you reveal the top 4 cards of your deck, potentially playing even more Etemon, Sukamon, and Chumon stuff, as long as the total play cost equal to 7 or less. And then being able to potentially load the board with a ton of Sukamons is really when you sort of like showcase the whole combo overall, which, you know, I'll show you guys later how it all works, which is definitely, again, a very nice secondary level 6 that you always want to be seeing. That's it for all of our Digimon. Let's talk about our Tamers here. As for Tamers, 2 Izzies, really just generic good black memory Tamer. You're always effectively going to be playing it for 3 costs rather than its 4 costs because you gain the memory back. Cycling and, you know, rearranging your deck is kind of nice because you do quite a bit of like revealing top decks with your on deletion effects, so it's going to help you out for sure in times when you plan ahead. Then for the option cards, signature option of Numemon, which has a lot of synergy with the entire deck. Cooties Kick. Now, instead of its 2 costs, when you would use this option card, you can actually reduce the cost by 1 if you have Tamer in play, and specifically Black Tamer as well. And then until the end of your opponent's next turn, one of your Digimon with Numemon, Sukamon, Nanimon, or Etemon in its name can't be blocked and also has on deletion gain 3 memory, which is really funny. It can really like give you a whole lot of advantage all of a sudden, and your opponents won't see it coming, and you know, a very funny and cool card to actually play. It has a security effect which is very different, which lets you play a black Digimon with 3 costs or less by revealing the top 3 cards of your deck. After you play it, you trash the rest, but you don't unfortunately get to add this option to your hand. It would be really nice if you actually get to do that though. And then last but not least, to round off for all of the options, Pride Memory Boost. Since we play a lot lot of play costs that are like 4 or less. This card is just incredibly good, especially when you play it in the early stages game, because it just gives you a free Sukamon on the board, and it's very likely to hit them anyways because of the sheer amount we're playing and the ratios when it comes to this deck. And yeah, definitely a very good when it comes to the delay and gaining memories too. So like always, let's showcase some other cards and tech choices you guys can also be including in this particular deck. The first question you guys might be asking, oh, why aren't we playing the BT13 King Sukamon right here, and it's not included in the deck overall? Now, very similar to the current King Sukamon, it can Digivolve for 3 effectively on top of Sukamon. It has a when attacking effect, which lets you play a level 4 or lower Sukamon in its name from your hand without paying the memory cost, which is definitely nice, you know, reading this. But overall, the build I'm trying to go for at the moment is I do want to prioritize my Etemon a little bit more. It's been tough to kind of find space, but maybe adding 1 or 2 of these guys in later on could actually work. So stay tuned for updates though. Then for other generic rookies, instead of just running Chumon, Chikurimon is a really good sort of like meta call, just because there's a lot of hard playing with cost reduction overall, and Chikurimon, you know, sort of like stops that. It doesn't really hurt you too much when it comes to your own deck, because you don't really reduce any hard play costs overall. But you do play Digimon via effects, which is still fine though. And speaking of which, another really good package to sometimes run is the Tamers and the Maki package, just because you can actually Digivolve into your 2-color stuff with cost reduction. And the whole reason why you run Tamers inside with Maki is just because, you know, it's a little bit more value when you do end up searching it, and it's kind of nice to give it extra like 1000 DP when you do have like 2 or more colors with your Digimon, which you oftenly do just because everything is like black and yellow. Moving on to some really other like level 7 stuff you guys can be running. I'm not running any level 7 stuff at the moment, just because for consistency's sake, and I kind of like, you know, my whole level 6 lineup, there's not a whole lot of room to fit in. But there's Shine Gray on Rune mode, there's Defx, there's War as well. Shine Gray is just a really good meta to sort of like, you know, board wipe stuff, potentially, you know, delete things and, you know, keep things sort of like a little bit more in control. Defx is really good against specific matchups when it comes to like going wide, and then you can punish them to de-digivolve, clear board. And Zwart, I would even argue it being one of the best generic ones, just because it's less situational, but it can really help you push for advancing into a much stronger board state with it, by just because it can play more things when it's Digivolving, trashing cards from the top of your deck as well, which has a lot of synergy overall, but it does cost quite a bit to Digivolve. So yeah, these are some level 7 guys that you guys can be running if you ever want to. For another option, very similar to Cootie's Kick, we have Parabolic Junk here for 0 cost. Main, one of your Digimon gains on deletion, gain 2 memory until the end of the opponent's turn, instead of gaining 3 like Cootie's Kick, which has a lot more built-in archetype synergy instead. With its security effect, you get to add this to your hand, so you guys can juggle between whether this card, Parabolic Junk, or Cootie's Kick, just based on your personal preference. And one of the really good removal cards to sort of include into this deck is actually Heaven's Judgment, because you do play multicolors and you do play yellow as sort of your secondary color. It's very easy to fulfill it, and for 7 costs, you can minus something that's their opponent has with 6000 DP, and you basically get to do it 2 more times every time you activate this card. And if you want a little bit of defense, a little bit of surprise bombs, this is definitely the one that I would recommend and go to for sure when it comes to you know, taking out your opponent's Digimon. This deck is a little bit unusual just because of the ratios of you're playing in the level 4s. There's a lot of hard playing involved. So when it comes to mulliganing, the hands that you really want to see is you definitely want to be seeing your Chumons, you definitely want to be seeing all your different kinds of Sukamons, which are really crucial. But depending on what you have and depending on what situation, you would play them a little bit differently just to sort of adapt to the game plan. But overall, of course, you're always just going to be hatching your egg. When you're Digivolving for your Chumon, this one is the one that you probably want to Digivolve the most anyways. This one is good to Digivolve if you want to choke your opponent down to 1 memory and manipulate the memory gauge a little bit. But like I mentioned in deck profile, this one in particular, you actually want to be hard playing it or otherwise be playing it for free via your effects usually. And then for this one, you can Digivolve it mostly, and then you can hard play it in the middle stages game to grab yourself like certain Sukamons that you want to grab back and set up your trash as well at the same time. So whichever way you want to go. Sukamons are 3 costs, like I mentioned, and they can just be hard played just by itself because of its memory efficiency. Now, having Chumon specifically sometimes allows you to Digivolve it for 1 cost, so it's really, again, about playing the memory gauge, which is really important in the early stages of the game, depending on the situation. And, you know, just give your opponent as low as memory as possible, which this deck is really good at, and sort of like playing around that because of all the versatility when it comes to Digivolving and hard playing and whatnot and all that. But like I mentioned, you know, Platinum Sukamon is really good when it comes to de-digivolving, controlling. This BT11 Sukamon is great for searching, and then the BT3 one, which is my favorite one, lets you play more Chumons back, so you're keeping cyclability ongoing. What do you do as soon as you have your Sukamons? Well, you don't really have to think too much. You can just start swinging and utilizing their effects to search and whatnot, and just chip away your opponent's security. That's what you really want to be doing. Eventually, you do want to be seeing your level 5s, either your Etemon or your King Sukamon. It comes down to what you see is how you would change the playstyle. If you have a lot of Sukamons in your trash, that's when you would go into the King Sukamon and you can transform your opponent's Digimon into a Sukamon and sort of control the board just like that. And like I mentioned earlier, it's very good synergy with the BT11 Etemon. Whether you hard play or Digivolve it afterwards, you can just straight up remove your opponent's Digimon just based off of that because of the combinations like here. King Sukamon can be really aggressive. The more Sukamons you have on board, you can take down more of your opponent's security. If it ever would be deleted, it has the all turns protection effect underneath it with one of these Sukamons to delete your own Sukamons. It's not even once per turn either, so it's just really good when it comes to protecting it overall there. As for this Etemon, sometimes you just have to Digivolve it to sort of like give your opponent fewer memory. But in the early stages of the games, if your opponent is giving you quite a bit of memory, I actually even like to hard play this Etemon, for example. And because by hard playing it, you don't really want to utilize too many inheritables. The inheritables you want to see for your Sukamon then is like nothing. Otherwise, having this Chumon with his on deletion is kind of nice. But anyways, the whole point is you just want to attack with this guy as much as you can, chip away your opponent's security, apply pressure to sort of win faster. Otherwise, it has its blocker capability. But when it gets deleted, you want to utilize its effects, so then you can actually potentially play Metal Etemon and KingEtemon. Metal Etemon is great because eventually when you do play it right here like that, with its on-play when Digivolving effect, you get to, you know, play more things from the top 4 cards of your deck, and you're gonna hit a lot of things. Usually you can, you know, very easily just set up like 2 Sukamons just like that, which is really good and really good value. Otherwise, eventually the alternative ways is to Digivolve it on top of King Sukamon into Metal Etemon, or Digivolve into KingEtemon for further board control. And just by doing that, you just sort of control the board, you know, make attacks and just keep pressuring, keep floating with your Sukamons. And because of KingEtemon's ability, making them all blockers, you can synergize a lot with their on deletion effects, especially when it comes to Platinum Sukamon to disrupt your opponent's plays. If they attack, you block, and then you de-digivolve one of their guys, and then you get to, you know, utilize more effects. And they're all protected too, as long as you have the typical Sukamon inheritable, so that you can protect them too at the same time. And then yeah, it's just a lot of like control aspect, and makes it kind of difficult for opponents to play around when you get there. And then as for Garemon, just looping back to the early stage of the game, sometimes you just want to hard play this for the most cases, so they can trash one and draw 2, and, you know, get to that sort of stage of the game to help you find more pieces. And that's really mostly it. And then to final off in you know, spicy situations, you can play your Cooties Kick, you know, to sort of utilize to swing and then gain memory, and it lasts your opponent's turn as well, so it can really disrupt their plays. Play your Izzies when you can, and so you can, you know, look at the top 3 cards of your deck and then sort of gain the memory back, and also, you know, plan ahead your plays. And then if you ever have Pride Memory Boost, you're gonna hit it very frequently, so you can, you know, hit all these Sukamons just like that. And yeah, you just continue to chip, continue to bring stuff back again and again, and keep floating, and you build a big pile of poo, and you just overwhelm your opponents just like that. So if you guys want to see more Etemon and Sukamon content, click this video right here and watch it right now. Definitely stay tuned for more future support like I mentioned, because eventually this deck might just become tier 0, and maybe one day we'll get there and it'll be really competitive. As always, thank you guys so much for watching. You guys have a great day, great night, wherever you are. See you in the next video, and this is Vault, signing out.